Salutations, respected viewers. In this video I'm going to explain why I think if there were a second referendum in the United Kingdom on exiting the European Union, the Remain side would probably win. They would be close. Well, look at where we are now. May is signing that withdrawal agreement with the European Union, and it looks like it's going to get near unanimous approval from the Chancelleries of Europe. Now, what really keeps them up at night in other European capitals is the prospect that Brexit might be a rip-roaring success. And if it causes the United Kingdom to prosper tremendously, then some of the other more affluent EU member states will say, well, why aren't we doing the same thing? The Danes have got a strong Eurosceptic caucus. There's a lot of Euroscepticism in Finland, with the True Finns party doing well. Let's say even France, where over 40% of people recently said they wish to leave the EU. The Netherlands, they voted against the European Constitution about 12 years ago. France did likewise, well, as I just mentioned, and blah, blah, blah. And the Germans will say, why are we paying for this whole thing? So if a couple of other member states leave, the whole thing is in danger of imploding. I don't think it would completely collapse. It would probably reform considerably. Only that level of shock would cause it to put its house in order, become looser, would stop expanding, and so on. Where are we going to be in 4 months from now? The United Kingdom, by the end of March, might have left the European Union. This withdrawal agreement goes ahead. Or there might be another election, a new government headed by another Conservative Prime Minister, or more likely, a Labour leader, not necessarily Corbyn, trying to negotiate a more advantageous deal. Or there'll be a referendum, a second referendum on that very same question. So these are really the three possibilities at the moment. Now, the numbers just aren't there because of the parliamentary arithmetic to get May out. I predict that this withdrawal agreement will lose, not by as much as some say. I'm going to say it's going to lose by 40 votes. The DUP have spoken against it, have said they're going to be against it, but they're not as vehement in saying they oppose this withdrawal agreement as one might expect, because farmers and business executives, including people who lean towards the DUP, unionists, say, no, actually this is a good one because it will put an end to this agonising wait, this uncertainty which is driving away investment, and it means there'll be still smooth commerce across the Irish border, all sorts of things like that. So the DUP, some of them might abstain actually, and I'm thinking May's going to lose by 40 votes, but I could be wrong. If it goes one way or the other, it might be only by a handful of votes, and I really mean just a handful. Nobody thinks it's going to be that decisive. So what do we do then? May stays on as Prime Minister or not, vote of confidence or not. One way to try and avoid the vote of confidence would be to say, okay, second referendum. Now, May has excluded the possibility of holding another referendum, but electoral pledges are broken faster than you can say Jack Robinson. Remember, she ruled out an early election when she became First Lord of the Treasury, and then she reneged on that promise. So electoral promises are not worth anything. They are mere hot air, tomorrow's rubbish. Like Cameron on Lisbon, he specifically appealed for votes in the 2009 Euro election, saying he would put the Lisbon Treaty to a referendum, and then didn't. He shredded that vow. This from the man who said he was going to restore public trust in politics. Cameron, the day before the referendum, publicly promised on television, I saw him say it, that if he lost, he would not step down as Prime Minister, and he promptly did just that. So saponaceous as they usually are. So May might say circumstances have changed. Now, the Labour front bench says they're against a second referendum, but most Labour backbenchers are for it. And okay, Corbyn campaigned for Remain, but you could tell his heart wasn't in it. So a lot of them are crypto Remainers. Despite saying, oh, well, I accept that we're going to have to leave because of the referendum, they prefer to remain. And this is just the excuse they're looking for. The Lib Dems have been vociferous in demanding a people's vote, as they call it, almost as though people didn't get to vote the first time. It's richly comic because the Lib Dems about 10 years ago were calling for a referendum on membership of the European Union. The Lib Dems are huge enthusiasts for referenda because they also perform so appallingly in elections. So the Europhile Tories want another election, and that's a bit over a dozen of them. Want another referendum. There we go. The SNP want it as well. And of course their aim is to scupper the whole thing, but particularly scupper it for Scotland. But the SNP, in a sense, are in a win-win situation. If the United Kingdom remains within the EU, fine, that's what they want. But if it leaves, they feel it puts the breakup of the Union back on the agenda as a serious possibility. Remember, in Scotland, 62% of people voted Remain versus 52% in the United Kingdom as a whole. And it's interesting to note that if Scotland were not in the United Kingdom, the majority for Remain would be, sorry, for Leave would be quite decisive. It's 52% as it was. Without Scotland, it'd be more like 56%, and that's a bit harder to argue against. So the referendum might be the only way to break the deadlock. If the EU are not willing to give even the tiniest concessions, if the United Kingdom is just not willing to wear the deal that's offered by Brussels. And as I've limbed elsewhere, the reason I think that people should vote for this poor deal anyway is because I want Brexit, and this will actually deliver it. It will deliver on at least some of what I want. Where it is, if it doesn't happen, there are two likelihoods: either leaving without an agreement or remaining in the European Union. And I think the latter is more likely. Leaving without an agreement, there would be headaches to go with that. I mean, hats off to the sang-froid of those gallant Brexiteers, the likes of the Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg. But informed opinion is that it would cause serious ructions, at least in the short term. And so I'd rather not risk that. And, you know, the Irish issue would flare up again. So the EU have not quite given up hope that they might yet be able to put paid to this whole Brexit thing. After all, it's been a bit of a nightmare for them. It's been a huge failure. And if the United Kingdom votes to stay back in, then they think that will absolutely kill the Brexit issue forever. The EU will have been saved, and the pound will soar, the economy will roar, all the rest of it. So some extremist Remainers in the United Kingdom have been trying to undercut their own government because they have not given up the fantasy that they may be able to undo the referendum result. So they stand athwart the will of the people. So when EU states get it wrong, according to the europhile elite, they have made to vote again, like Denmark over the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, the Republic of Ireland twice over, so we voted over Treaty of Nice a second time, we voted over the Treaty of Lisbon a second time. But of course, if you vote the way the Europhiles want, that's it. This issue can never ever be revisited. But it can be reopened when the Eurosceptics win. It's grossly unjust. It shows how illogical and undemocratic the European Union is, and which is yet another reason to be totally against it. The one-way ratchet, acquis communautaire, a competence once ceded to the Union, can never ever be repatriated to the member states. Another piece of political sleight of hand was pretending the Treaty of Lisbon was not the same as the EU constitution. It was it had its constitutional baggage removed, but apart from that, it was just there. It was simply a rebranding exercise. So I think that Remain would slightly win. Now, I know that Leave, we would have the Ciceronian speech of Boris Johnson on our side, but people don't trust him as far as they could punch him, including myself. He was on the Leave side for entirely self-interested and cynical reasons, and he was then this Brexit secretary who resigned on point of principle. I don't think you'll find many people really believed that it was unacceptable. He did it because he calculated this gave him the best shot at the top spot. He craves being Prime Minister. World King is what he called himself as a toddler, so unwisely vouchsafed by his sister, Rachel Johnson. You know, it's a bitch having a journalist as a sister. So the demographics are moving the way of the Remainers. So it shows that Remain would win by 52% this time, which is just what it showed 2.5 years ago. But the thing is, the very elderly, people over the age of 80, are strongly Leave. And of course, some of those have died in 2.5 years. This thing's almost at a knife edge. And the people who've turned 18 since June 2016 are very likely to be Remainers. There are a lot more of them than the very elderly. On the other hand, there's lower turnout amongst the very young. So some people who voted Leave have got jittery and felt that Project Fear was, no chimera. These are real problems. The economy slowed down. The EU would throw the kitchen sink at it. They probably would actually offer real concessions at the last minute because they don't want to risk a Leave vote again. They know that Leave is a possibility when they kid themselves into thinking that couldn't happen. So I think that is quite likely to happen. What's the likelihood that this will happen? I'm going to give it a 40% likelihood. 30% likelihood that the United Kingdom will leave on schedule by the end of March 2019. And about a 30% likelihood of leaving without an agreement. Hard Brexit, as it's popularly known. It remains to be seen. We live in interesting times.